Ever wondered how the legendary desert fox, Erwin Rommel, and his Afrika Korps were ultimately defeated in North Africa? It's a story of logistics, overstretched supply lines, and some critical strategic blunders. Let's dive into why Germany lost the Desert War. At the heart of the Axis failure was a simple, brutal fact. They couldn't get enough stuff to the front lines. The Mediterranean Sea, their primary supply route, was a death trap. British submarines and aircraft, operating from the island fortress of Malta, relentlessly attacked German and Italian convoys. Every tank, every barrel of fuel, and every box of ammunition that went to the bottom of the sea was a loss the Afrika Korps could not replace. Rommel was a genius at tactical warfare, but even he couldn't fight without supplies. He famously complained that his hands were tied by the constant shortages. This brings us to the second major issue: strategic priorities. For Hitler, the war in North Africa was always a sideshow. The main event, the real focus of Germany's military might, was the invasion of the Soviet Union Operation Barbarossa. The Eastern Front consumed the vast majority of Germany's men, machines, and resources. While Rommel was begging for a few more panzer divisions, hundreds of them were being thrown into the meat grinder in Russia. North Africa was never given the resources it needed to achieve a decisive victory. It was a classic case of being starved of support. Then there was the problem of overextension. Rommel's brilliant advances, like his famous dash towards the Suez Canal, were also his undoing. With every mile he pushed forward, his supply lines grew longer and more vulnerable. It became a logistical nightmare to get fuel and ammunition to the tip of his spearhead. The British, on the other hand, were falling back on their own supply bases in Egypt. The further Rommel advanced, the weaker he became, and the stronger his opponents got. It was a paradox of desert warfare. We also can't ignore the sheer industrial power of the Allies, especially the United States. Once America entered the war, the floodgates opened. The British Eighth Army was soon re-equipped with brand new American tanks, like the Sherman. These weren't necessarily better than the German panzers one-on-one, but there were just so many of them. The Germans were facing an enemy that could replace its losses almost instantly, while their own tank strength dwindled with every battle. It was an industrial war of attrition that Germany simply could not win. Finally, Operation Torch in November 1942 was the nail in the coffin. American and British forces landed in Morocco and Algeria, to the west of Rommel's position. Suddenly, the Afrika Korps was caught in a giant pincer movement, squeezed between Montgomery's Eighth Army advancing from Egypt and the fresh Allied forces to their rear. There was no escape. Rommel was a brilliant commander, but he was put in an impossible situation. Trapped and out of supplies, the fate of the Axis forces in North Africa was sealed. Their eventual surrender in May 1943 marked a major turning point in the war, paving the way for the Allied invasion of Italy. So it wasn't a single mistake, but a combination of critical factors: strangled supply lines, misplaced priorities, logistical overreach, and overwhelming Allied industrial might. The legend of the Desert Fox is compelling, but the reality is that the war in North Africa was lost before it even began. Thanks for watching, and if you found this interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into history.